What happens when a black girl from Alabama walks into a billion-dollar tech firm and no one knows she's the new CEO? The sliding glass doors at Halston and Myers Tech Solutions whispered open just before 7:45 a.m., and Tamika Holloway stepped through with a navy canvas tote on her shoulder, a plain gray dress hugging her figure just enough, and a pair of well-worn flats that had seen more gravel roads than corporate hallways. Her natural coils were pulled back in a low puff, and her only jewelry was a thin silver cross around her neck. She looked ordinary. At least, that's what most people saw. A man in a charcoal suit glanced up from his phone as she walked past. His eyes flickered for a second, then dropped back to the screen. Two women near the elevators gave each other a side glance, the kind you don't think people notice, but Tamika did. "Who let the intern in this early?" someone muttered behind her. Tamika didn't flinch. She'd heard worse back home in Monroeville, Alabama, where her high school principal once told her to aim practical, right after she mentioned applying to Howard. She glanced around the sleek, modern lobby, walls made of glass and polished stone, a tall fiddle-leaf fig in the corner, and an LED panel flashing company updates. This was it. This was the place she had been brought in to clean up, to turn around, to fix. But she wasn't here to flex or show off. Not yet. Today, she needed to watch, to see who people were when they thought she was nobody. Just as she reached the security desk, a man in his mid-40s stepped in front of her, holding a coffee in one hand and a dry cleaning bag in the other. "Hey, I'm glad you're here early. Can you hang this in the marketing storage room? Try not to wrinkle it this time, okay?" Tamika blinked. "Excuse me?" The man didn't look up. "You're the temp, right? Cynthia sent you?" Before she could answer, he dropped the hanger into her hand and walked away without another word. Tamika stared at the bag. Inside was a tailored navy suit, expensive by the look of it, and completely irrelevant to her job. She smiled softly and placed it neatly over the back of a nearby chair. A younger woman nearby, blonde ponytail, AirPods in, watched the whole thing with a smirk. "You're supposed to take it upstairs," she said. "Third floor, marketing." "I'm not the temp," Tamika replied, her voice calm but clear. The woman blinked, surprised by her confidence. But before she could say anything else, the elevator dinged open. A heavy-set man in a dark green polo stood inside, sipping an energy drink. His eyes met Tamika's, then traveled down to her shoes. "You lost?" he asked. "No, sir." "You here for admin onboarding? HR is on too." "I know where I'm going," Tamika said. She stepped into the elevator beside him and pressed the button for floor 12. He raised an eyebrow. "That's executive." Tamika just smiled. "I know." But what she didn't know yet was just how deep the rot went inside those walls, and how quickly she was going to have to make her presence known. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, revealing a quiet corridor lined with smoked glass offices and wall-mounted displays. Floor 12 looked different, colder, more expensive, like success was supposed to live here. Tamika stepped out with purpose, but within 10 steps, she could feel eyes on her again. At the far end of the hallway, a group of 4 men stood near the espresso machine, laughing too loudly for the time of day. One of them noticed her and elbowed the guy next to him. "She lost?" One of them chuckled under his breath. Tamika ignored them and walked straight toward the large glass door marked Executive Conference Room. The receptionist, early 20s, flawless makeup, and acrylics clicking away at her keyboard, stood to greet her. "Hi," the young woman said, glancing at the tote bag on Tamika's shoulder. "Are you delivering something?" "No." "Okay, are you with catering?" Tamika smiled politely. "No." The receptionist hesitated, visibly uncomfortable. "I'm sorry. This area is for executive staff only." Tamika leaned in just slightly. "I know. That's why I'm here." Before the woman could respond, a middle-aged man in a slim tailored suit came striding down the hallway, phone pressed to his ear. He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw Tamika. "You're early," he said, lowering the phone. His name was Alan Brewster, Chief Financial Officer. He'd been with the company for over 12 years. When the board appointed a new CEO, he had expected the job to go to him. Tamika offered a small nod. "Good morning, Mr. Brewster." He blinked, startled she knew his name. "And you are?" "Tamika Holloway." Alan stared, then let out a forced chuckle. "Oh, okay. You're from the firm doing the audit?" "No, I'm your new CEO." Silence. The receptionist's hand froze above her keyboard. The hallway suddenly felt vacuum-sealed. Even the men near the espresso machine had stopped talking. Alan's smile faltered. "I'm sorry, what?" Tamika pulled out her company badge and held it up without a word. Her name, her photo, her title, Chief Executive Officer, displayed in bold print. A beat passed. Then another. Alan cleared his throat and stepped aside. "Of course, right this way." Inside the conference room, a long walnut table stretched from wall to wall. Leather chairs surrounded it, and two 70-inch screens were mounted on either end. Tamika placed her tote gently on a chair near the head of the table. She didn't sit yet. She turned and looked at Alan. "I'd like to get started at 9 a.m. sharp. Please let the executive team know." He nodded stiffly, still processing. "Yes, of course." She watched him leave, the door slowly closing behind him. For a moment she was alone in the room. She exhaled, deep and quiet. In some ways, this wasn't new. She'd spent her whole life walking into rooms where people didn't expect her to belong. But this time, it wasn't about belonging. It was about leading. She sat down, opened her laptop. Across the room, someone knocked. The door opened slowly and a woman in her 50s stepped in. Auburn bob, red-framed glasses, sharp eyes. "I heard what happened outside," she said, without introducing herself. "You handled that well." Tamika looked up. "Thank you." The woman walked in and held out her hand. Janice Greer, head of legal. Tamika shook it, firm, confident. "You're the first person today who didn't ask what I was doing here," Tamika said. Janice smiled. "That's because I already read your file. Impressive background. You built an ag tech company in rural Alabama from scratch and sold it for 8 figures before turning 30. I don't need to see your shoes to know you're qualified." Tamika let out a small laugh. Janice tilted her head. "You ready for the wolves?" "I grew up around snakes. Wolves don't scare me." But Janice knew what Tamika didn't yet. This wasn't just a culture problem. It was personal. And some people didn't want her there at all. By 9:03 a.m., the conference room was full. 11 executives, not counting Tamika, took their seats. Some with laptops open, others with expensive pens and notepads they probably never wrote on. Every seat was claimed, except the one at the head of the table. Tamika walked in without announcement and calmly took that spot. A few heads turned. A few phones lit up discreetly under the table. One man, tall, mid-30s, smug, whispered something to the person next to him. They chuckled. Janice sat 2 seats to Tamika's right. Her arms were crossed, eyes scanning the room like she was watching a poker game. "Good morning," Tamika said clearly. Only half the room responded. She let the silence linger for a beat. "Let me save you the formalities. Yes, I'm the new CEO. No, I'm not here to shake hands and smile at quarterly projections. I was brought in because this company is bleeding talent, losing contracts, and quietly drowning under its own arrogance. And from what I've seen already, that diagnosis holds up." That got their attention. A woman near the end of the table closed her laptop slowly. A man in a purple shirt leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes squinting like he was calculating something. Tamika clicked a remote and brought up the first slide. Numbers, charts, contracts canceled, employee churn rates, anonymous HR complaints dating back 2 years, everything in black and white. She wasn't there to impress them. She was there to wake them up. "Let me be clear," she said. "This company doesn't have a revenue problem. It has a people problem, one that starts right here in this room." The tall guy who had laughed earlier, his nameplate said Jason Feld, smiled and leaned forward. "With all due respect, Ms. Holloway, you've been here less than 2 hours. Bit early for sweeping judgments, don't you think?" Tamika didn't blink. "You're right. It would be early if this were based on opinion. But I've spent the last 6 weeks reviewing your employee records, your turnover trends, your internal Slack channels. Yes, we pulled those. And the exit interviews you thought no one read. I don't deal in feelings, Mr. Feld. I deal in facts." The chuckle died in his throat. Someone near the door let out a small breath. It sounded like relief. Tamika turned to another exec, Emily something, Chief Marketing Officer. "You lost 4 of your top 5 creative leads in less than 8 months. Do you know why?" Emily shifted uncomfortably. "They said they were moving on to better opportunities." "No," Tamika said. They said they were tired of being interrupted, ignored, and overruled by people who had less experience but louder voices. Emily looked down. Tamika paused to let it sink in. I didn't come here to make friends. I came here to change a culture that's broken. And change starts at the top. Silence again. Then Jason snorted under his breath. We'll see how long this lasts. Janice turned her head toward him. Excuse me. Jason raised an eyebrow, cocky. Nothing. Just, we've had 3 CEOs in 5 years. Just saying the chair's not exactly known for being stable. Tamika stood slowly, walked to the edge of the table. You're right. This chair hasn't been stable, but I'm not here to warm it. I'm here to bolt it down. Jason looked away. Tamika scanned the room, locking eyes with each person one by one. If you're not ready to rebuild, to listen, to grow, or if you think I'm not the right person for this, now's the time to leave, because I'm not going anywhere. Nobody moved. Tamika clicked the remote again. Great. Let's begin. But while she had silenced them for now, she hadn't won them over, and some were already plotting ways to push her out. Later that afternoon, Tamika sat in her temporary office, a wide glass cube overlooking the city, with a view that didn't match the mess she'd just stepped into. Her inbox was already piling up. Half the executive team hadn't followed up on what she'd asked for. A few had even CC'd her on threads where they were openly questioning her authority. She didn't need to read between the lines. The resistance wasn't subtle. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Janice peeked in. You decent? Tamika smirked. You sound like my auntie back home. Janice walked in holding a thick folder. Figured you'd want to see this. Internal audit reports from Q2. Nothing that'll surprise you, but it's worse than what you presented this morning. Tamika took the folder and flipped through the pages. Budgets inflated, consultant fees doubled, vendor invoices that didn't make sense. This doesn't look like mismanagement, Tamika said. This looks intentional. Janice nodded. Some of it is. There's been backdoor deals, department kickbacks, nothing huge, just a few thousand here and there, but over time, adds up to 6 figures. Tamika closed the folder slowly. You think Brewster knows? He doesn't just know, Janice said. He's in it. Tamika leaned back. She wasn't shocked. Alan had been cold the second she walked in, and that cold wasn't about her being new. It was fear. Fear that she'd see too much. I can't fire him without proof, Tamika muttered. No, but you can dig, quietly. I can help, Janice offered. Tamika looked at her. Why are you helping me? Janice shrugged. I've been here 10 years. Watched this place rot from the inside. Nobody ever did anything. But then you walked in and you didn't flinch. That matters. And between you and me, she glanced around. I'm tired of pretending like this is normal. Tamika smiled. All right then, let's get to work. For the next 2 hours, they combed through files, reports, and flagged transactions. Tamika asked questions, took notes, and built a timeline. The deeper she went, the clearer the pattern became. Senior staff skimming off budgets, manipulating hiring processes, and rewarding friends over talent. This wasn't just a toxic culture, it was a closed circle. Around 6 p.m., she stood and stretched. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since breakfast. She packed her things and headed toward the elevator, catching glimpses of empty cubicles and abandoned desks along the way. The building was nearly silent now. As she passed the break room, she overheard voices, quiet, whispered, but clear enough. She's not gonna last. No way. You saw the look on Alan's face this morning? He's already making calls. CEO or not, she's not one of us. They'll push her out before next quarter. Tamika didn't stop walking, didn't confront them, but she heard every word. In the parking garage, she sat in her car and stared at the steering wheel for a long moment. She thought about her father's hands, cracked, stained from years of tilling red Alabama soil, about how he used to say, you don't pull weeds to be polite, you pull them so the good stuff has a chance to grow. She started the engine. But what Tamika didn't realize was that while she was busy preparing for a war in the boardroom, someone had already started one behind her back. The next morning, Tamika arrived early again. This time, no one questioned her at the front desk. No dry cleaning was handed to her. No smirks. Just silence, like the building was holding its breath. She headed straight to her office and found Janice already inside, waiting. We've got something, Janice said, tapping a flash drive on the desk. Tamika sat down, eyes locked on her. How bad is it? Worse than we thought, Janice replied. Alan's been approving inflated contracts for months. Most of them are run through a shell vendor registered in his brother-in-law's name. Tamika's expression hardened. That's embezzlement. Janice nodded. And that's not all. Jason Feld, your friend from yesterday, he's been taking referral bonuses under fake names, paid himself out 5 times last quarter. That's HR fraud. Tamika took a deep breath. She should have been angry, but honestly, she was ready. I want a full report. Every name, every transaction. I want to see who signed what and when. You'll have it by noon, Janice said. Then hesitating, she added, you might want to consider legal counsel. This isn't going to go down easy. Tamika stood. I didn't come here for easy. At 12:45 p.m., she called an emergency executive meeting. By 1:15, the same group of faces was back in the boardroom. Some annoyed, others curious. Jason walked in late, with a protein bar in one hand and his phone in the other. All right, what's the fire drill? He muttered, plopping into his chair. Tamika didn't sit. She remained standing at the front, holding a thick folder in one hand and a remote in the other. I'm going to be very clear, she began. Over the past 48 hours, I've reviewed documents and data that show serious financial misconduct by multiple executives in this room. A murmur swept through the table. Jason laughed. Are we doing this again? What, you found a typo in someone's expense report? Tamika clicked the remote. A spreadsheet filled the screen. Names, amounts, dates, vendor registrations. Mr. Feld, she said, this is your name, and this, she pointed, is a vendor you claim to refer on 5 separate occasions. Problem is, that vendor doesn't exist, and the bank account it's tied to is under a fake LLC owned by your cousin in Tampa. Jason blinked. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Tamika turned to Alan. And Mr. Brewster, these contracts, 10 of them, were all signed under your approval. The receiving vendor was registered 3 months ago to an address that belongs to your brother-in-law. Alan's face went white. This is absurd. No, she said calmly. It's documented, confirmed, and already in the hands of external legal review. A silence stretched out across the room, thick and growing. I'll give each of you a chance to speak, but understand this. I'm not asking you to explain this to me. You'll be explaining it to federal investigators. Janice stood now, placing another set of documents on the table. We've already locked your company email accounts and suspended your system access. Effective immediately, your roles are under formal review. Jason stood up, voice shaking. You can't do this. You're not... I am, Tamika cut in. I'm exactly who I said I was, and the board gave me full authority to investigate and act accordingly. You didn't believe me on Monday. Maybe now you do. Alan tried to argue, tried to regain control of the room, but nobody followed. His voice bounced around the walls, landing flat. The others stayed seated, quiet. Some stared at the table. A few looked at Tamika with something new in their eyes. Not resentment, not defiance, something closer to respect. Tamika gathered the papers. If anyone else has something they want to admit, my door is open. But make no mistake, this isn't a threat. It's a clean start. She walked out without another word. But not everyone was grateful, and one of them was about to take it personal. Over the next 2 weeks, Halston & Myers looked like a company holding its breath. Jason Feld's office was cleaned out in a single afternoon. Alan Brewster was escorted from the building the next morning by security. No press release, no retirement speech. Just a quiet walk of shame down the executive hallway. Word spread fast. At first, there was fear. Whispers in break rooms. Slack messages that vanished as soon as they were sent. No one knew what Tamika would do next, but she didn't bring in a wrecking ball. She brought in chairs, literally. The following Monday, she rolled in a stack of folding chairs into the middle of the main floor and sat in a circle with 20 staffers from different departments, tech, sales, support, even janitorial. No titles, no agenda, just people. I want to hear what this place feels like, she told them. No filters, no sugarcoating. If this company were a person, how would you describe them? A young man from IT raised his hand. Fake. An older woman from customer support nodded, exhausting. Someone else muttered, clicky. They talked. She listened. No laptops, no phones, just notebooks and raw honesty. She started doing it every other day. Different teams, different voices. She asked questions that no previous CEO had ever cared to ask. What does respect look like here? How do you know your work matters? What's the last thing that made you want to quit? Tamika didn't take notes to look busy. She wrote because she was going to follow through, and people started noticing. Janice caught her one evening, long after most had gone home, rearranging the office space layout on a whiteboard. "You're redesigning the floor plan?" Tamika nodded. "Nobody collaborates because the departments are all walled off like silos. That's not a structure, that's a maze." She wiped one corner of the board clean and added, "No more corner offices." Janice raised an eyebrow. "Even yours?" Tamika smiled. "Especially mine." By the third week, the mood was changing. People were no longer just watching her, they were following her. HR started getting thank you emails from employees for the first time in years. Mid-level managers began asking for feedback instead of barking orders. Tamika launched something called Open Friday. Any employee could book a 10-minute slot to talk to her directly. The first week filled up in under an hour. One conversation stood out. A woman named Letitia from operations walked in, clearly nervous. "I don't really have a question," she said. I've never seen anyone up here who looks like me. Not just how you look, how you carry yourself. I wanted to say thank you." Tamika leaned forward. "Letitia, you belong in any room you're in. You don't need my permission for that, but I appreciate you saying it." Letitia smiled. "Nobody's ever said that to me." But even as the company began to shift, one email was making its way up the chain, an anonymous complaint accusing Tamika of discrimination and unfair termination. And the sender had connections on the board. By the time the complaint reached the board's desk, Tamika had already heard whispers. It came through a back channel, the kind Janice kept open in case the knives ever came out. "Alan," Janice said simply, dropping the printed email on Tamika's desk. Anonymous, but the phrasing? "It's him. Guaranteed." The complaint accused Tamika of creating an atmosphere of retaliation, claiming her firings were racially and personally motivated. It was written with just enough polish to feel official and just enough venom to sting. Tamika read it quietly, then she pushed the paper aside and leaned back. "They knew this might happen," she said. "That's why I documented everything, every meeting, every report, every approval." Janice nodded. "Good, because this isn't about the complaint. It's about who still wants the old system back." The board requested a formal review. Nothing dramatic, just protocol, they said. But everyone knew what it was, a power check. On the day of the review, Tamika walked into the boardroom alone. No entourage, no lawyer, just a black binder under her arm and a calm expression that said she'd been through storms before. 7 board members sat across from her. One of them, a silver-haired man in a blue tie, cleared his throat. "Ms. Holloway, we're here to ask about the decisions made during your first month. Some concerns have been raised." Tamika placed the binder on the table. "Everything's in there, timelines, documentation, witness statements, legal counsel sign-offs. You'll see that every termination was based on verified misconduct." Another board member, a woman in a green blazer, leaned forward. "This isn't just about procedure. Some feel the tone of the company has changed too quickly. That perhaps certain voices feel excluded." Tamika's jaw clenched for a second, but she didn't flinch. "Let me be clear," she said. "This company has operated for years as an exclusive club, a place where a few people made the rules and everyone else kept their head down. That's not leadership. That's survival. And I wasn't hired to maintain survival. I was hired to create change." Silence. She stood and flipped the binder open to a series of charts. Employee engagement is up 46%. HR complaints have dropped by over half. We've saved $1.2 million in misappropriated contracts. And for the first time in 5 years, we've retained our top engineering talent. She paused. "I'm not sorry if the tone has changed. It needed to." The room was still. No one looked her in the eye, except for one board member, an older black woman who hadn't spoken until now. She leaned in and said, "We've waited years for someone to say that out loud." The silver-haired man cleared his throat again, this time sounding smaller. "Thank you, Ms. Holloway. We'll be in touch shortly." Tamika gathered her things, walked out with her head high. 3 days later, she received the board's official response. The review was closed. No further action. Her decision stood. She didn't throw a party, didn't post a statement. Instead, she walked into the staff break room the next morning with a box of fresh donuts and sat at the table next to the interns. "Y'all like chocolate glaze or nah?" she asked with a grin. A guy from analytics laughed. "I knew you were different." Tamika looked up. "Different doesn't mean temporary. I'm here to stay." But what stuck with people wasn't the shakeups or speeches. It was that she showed up every day, even after being doubted, humiliated, and challenged, and never once raised her voice. A month later, Halston and Myers looked nothing like the company Tamika had first walked into. The glass still gleamed. The titles on the doors were the same. But the energy, that was different. People spoke up in meetings who used to stay silent. Department heads who never interacted were now sharing ideas over lunch. Even the Friday all-hands, which used to feel like a funeral with coffee, had turned into real conversations. Sometimes messy, but honest. And every now and then, someone would stop her in the hallway. Not to ask for a favor, not to curry favor, but to say thank you. Not because she saved the company, but because she made it human again. Tamika never bragged. She didn't need to. Her presence was proof enough. You can be soft-spoken without being weak, underestimated without being unprepared, kind without being naive. Her story wasn't just about climbing to the top. It was about what she did once she got there. She didn't wait for permission. She didn't try to fit in. She saw the system, named it, and changed it, from the inside out. And maybe that's the real lesson here. The world will try to box you in. It'll measure you by how you look, where you're from, how you talk, or what you don't have. And when you walk into that room, whatever that room is for you, there will always be someone who thinks you don't belong. But your job isn't to prove them wrong. Your job is to do the work anyway, and let your results do the talking. Because when it's time for real change, the loudest voice isn't always the one that leads. It's the one that listens, builds, and refuses to back down. So if you've ever felt invisible, underestimated, or written off, just remember this. Keep going, keep building, keep showing up. Because one day they'll realize you were the CEO the whole time. Now it's your turn. If this story moved you, share it. Someone out there might be walking into their day one, not knowing what they're about to change.